Hey guys, this is your friendly neighborhood, outspoken and deliberately telling you like it is. Now, today's subject matter is discussing about past and current and future relationships status with women. Now, I'm not going to argue about people's sexuality, but I'm going to pertain to mine. In today's time, and in this time of age, we know people have more promiscuity when it comes to their sexual indifference to today's norms in 2024. So, I want to talk to you about something that is it can be set off to be a good inclination, but it's most appalling. Now, I'm not going to discuss about my sexuality, but I am a straight, heterosexual man. I never had any relationship with the same sex person ever. In my adulthood, in my 20s, when I was gearing to be starting to be sexually active, I was never promiscuous in my younger years, so I knew in my own personal beliefs what it meant in relationships. Now, today's relationship statuses is, people and women are just as guilty as men are for having multiple affairs. But how is that indifferent in my today's world? Well, let me tell you, going back to my youth. I've dated women and I've had one night stands and also had unprotected sex. And that quote and unquote is if someone asks you if you have any children. Now, to answer that wholeheartedly, it's appalling, not appalling, but most regrettable to say, but it's not a joke in per se, not that I know of, quote unquote. Still no excuse, but how would that garner to say if she did get pregnant and if the baby was delivered, and would they say I'm a deadbeat person? Or would they say it's a typical response in the 90s when a lot of women were having children in uncommon wedlock? So we know that going forward, what that could mean also. So this one relationship I had, and she was a beautiful girl. She was outspoken and very sexual, in tune. But the indifferent is how that portray in our youth and today in 2024, someone is around 2021. Well, it's elevated because pornography is in the mainstream. We know pornography is most accessible when even my age it was not on your phone, on your laptop. So it heightens the awareness. And now it's foretelling that people's sexual nature even goes to transgender, bisexuality, homosexuality, and so on. And we know, and during certain avenues of pornography sites, that has a litany of pornography. And that even boggles my mind, but I'm not here to discuss about people's sexual preferences. But if you want to read about that or hear about that in journalism, it is very foretelling. But let's go about talking about chivalry and how that it pertains to people who are married, and you hear about weddings and anniversaries that go way beyond 50, 60 years of the same person they married and never divorced. And we know today's term globally, wedlocks usually dissipate within 5 to 10 years to move on and get divorced. So we know divorce rate is more than 50%. So that's how we know. It's because of the times and it's telltelling. But at this time, I was dating this one girl, and we'll call her, for prosperity sake, we'll call her Alexis. Okay? So when I was dating her, we would have good communicable, healthy response, going on dates, and even though it was a ill-fated romance, I still try to put my wholeheartedness towards it. But this woman had a promiscuity and was an exhibitionist. Now, when in a relationship, you talk about sexual preferences, and you say, how would she portray that? Well, there's so many ways you could say that, But I would not argue the point that how women can be predatory to men's indifference when you say men are cheating bastards too. It's not so different to see if women. It does not lower my bar, my standards to say my masculinity. So, nevertheless, we would go out, we would have openly healthy, unprotected sex. And at this time, whatever, um, the indifference was, when you're in a relationship, you're either with your friends or you're with her. So when you're going out with your girl and you decide to go with the boys, it could be the indifference. But they should respect that. But women have their needs. So do men. So at this time, I would, go to hockey games or watch the hockey games at home and go, and maybe she wanted to be with me. And I remember that time, Gretzky actually beat the Leafs, and that was the last time, I think in '93, that Gretzky moved on to the LA Kings to win the Stanley Cup there. It was ironic because me and my friend would say it was the most important game, and we didn't know if the Leafs would move on to the next round, and they haven't went further than that than the second round to this current day. So at that time, Gretzky, won numerous Stanley Cups. He went to LA, blah blah blah. But I remember that game specifically and what that entailed and how important that game was. But as teenagers, as friends were, that game was important in saying, you be with your girlfriends, I'll be with my friends. I got to watch the game. So going on forward, what actually happened after was more retrograding to know how she tried to use that anvil of sexual indifference, which is kind of normal, but you don't see how women can do that to knowing my needs and her needs. At this time, I had some inclinations that, maybe I was a little bit immature about the relationship, but I knew right from wrong when it came to my needs and about asking her about her needs. So when we used to go out, we would go to clubs, we go to restaurants, and we would have our fun. But at this time, I was more garnered about her ideas and her promiscuity, and she was apparently cheating with other men, right? But she felt um, charismatic to do that. But I didn't want to believe that, and that's when you start asking if she did get pregnant. That idea says, you know, you're the dad or someone else is the dad. But one thing is, in relationships, when you're in one aspect or another, one person or the other would either reciprocate more and to be less. So if I didn't love her as much, she'd probably reciprocate that back. Or if I loved her too much, she would be less. And usually, if you love both each other, hopefully it is a healthy relationship. But when you're adding tangents to that, it can be dismayed. So during this time, she had a lot of gay friends, which I wouldn't argue to the point, but it is argumentative to know what would that mean if we were all drinking and jostling around and talking about, people's indifferences. So here I am with this girl I'm dating, and she brings this guy. Let's call him Frank. So Frank would come and they go to her, Alexis, who's this guy? Right? Oh, he's a friend. We met. Hmm. So you know what? Now, gay men know how to intertwine with straight men to convince them because, some people push the anvil on that, especially when they're drunk, to use that as an excuse, right? And you see how these guys would try to perpetrate that with your girl. So here comes Frank, and we said, Frank wants to party with us at her house. So I said, why not? So I bring, I think, I had 2 or 3 specially designed liqueur drinking glasses, which was handed down to me by my grandfather. So I said, we're going to have a tequila party. We went there, we got sloshed, and here came the indifference. Now, I would known that he confessed he was a homosexual. And again, I'm secure with my own identity to know that. So we would go drink, and at this time, the girl I'm dating, Alexis, she starts compromising me. Cast away and see what happens. Reel it in. Am I going to bite? So here he is. Now she's convincing her. She's, I want to ask you something. I go, what are you going to ask me, Alexis? Tell me. With Ryan over there, sitting there on the side drinking. Now it came in. I want to see um, Frank suck your cock. What? I started laughing. And I looked at Frank. I go, did you put her up to that? Were you two like nestling around? So I went to her and I said, Alexis, what are you trying to prove here? Right? So I go, just drop it. So he carried on drinking. Here she asks again. And then she blows him up, why? I go, you stupid bitch, right? Don't you know why? Right? At this time, she gets kind of nervous. And I go, I say, please be agitated. We're drinking because they're now throwing the glasses, like trying to break it because I told them in retrospect how important it was to me. And here's this silly dumb bitch breaking that fucking little glass shot that was given. I was mortified. I go, what are you doing? Right? At this time, her gay homosexual friend, I don't know if she's having sex with him or not, but it adds to the confusion, right? Because if she was into that, I wasn't, and that's when I knew I had to break up with her. She knew that too. Again, she's asking the same question about him having me to get blown by this guy. Again, I said to him previous to that, which led up to it, I don't know what you're doing with Alexis, but you better be careful, I said. Don't try to ruin that relationship with her and I. And that's what he did. So after that, we would go on again a second time. Now, after she broke the first glass, what does this ass wipe do? He breaks the second glass. We call them Rucka bottles or Rucka shot glasses. It's something that, you would drink Ouzo or Rucka. It's like a licorice type of drink. I'm not too fancy with it, but, I like tequila. And here he breaks it. Right? First, I deny him, through her, say, fucking cut that shit out, right? So they aggravated, and she said it one more time. At this time, I was so agitated, I was right about to strike her, like the forehand. How dare you, you silly slut, I thought. But I garnered my idea, and I looked at her, and I called her the most egregious name. And suddenly from that happy face came a frown. Right? I said, take your shit and get the fuck out. In fact, I realized I was in her house, and I left. Right? Like I should. I told Frank and Alexis to go to hell, basically. I was enraged to know what he was doing. But nevertheless, you call back, and now the relationship is on the rocky road. She goes, but Jim, I want you to go take me to the club. So at the same time, I'm thinking about maybe I can salvage this relationship. So we end up going to a club right down the street from here. It doesn't exist. It's called Colby's. And in Colby's, it's an old gay bar, right? I said, I'm not too comfortable going there, but I'm not worried about my sexuality. Why would I? I'm thinking about her needs, and now we're just boyfriend and girlfriend, just, being at that age, promiscuous in her part, more so. So we go to Colby's. Within 10 to 15 minutes, not even, she's on a dance floor, dancing. Good for her, I'm thinking. She's enjoying herself. There's these gay men around me. I talk to them. And I never had inclination to say if their needs supermet mine. I wasn't worried. Just like any other friend, maybe you had a friend who was having a party at a gay party for another friend, you would go there not worrying about that. So that's why I know. But if you ask me in the future if I would go to a gay bar, why would I go there knowingly by myself? Just with a friend, to be just like anyone else would go into any other bar, which would be more straight if you had a gay person. You have to think about that. So at the end of the night, not even the end of the night, I'm sorry, in the club, here she's on the dance floor and two men roll up on her. One from the back, right? And one from the front. And they're doing the lambada. Ooh, right? And I looked, and they were getting more. One had his hands around her, and they were like one being stuck to each other. She loved it, Teji, while looking at me like this. Like, I knew what she was trying to do to offset that, to see what I would think. But at this time, I know her sexual needs and her sexual procurements, she's probably having sex with these two guys after or before. So she's making out with them, and I get really vexed, right? Really vexed. I wanted to go in the floor and just smash her, But I thought, why would I waste my time to create violence for some silly dally little bitch who's trying to have sex with two gay men in front of me? I was enraged, but at this time, I said to her friend and everything, I'm going. I don't appreciate this, and I left the club, but I have to realize she has to get home. Thinking of her compromising myself to make sure she would get home. So I told her friend, I'm going to wait outside the club. She better get in there fast. So I wait. Now she realized the totality, and she's mortified. She gets in the car, distraught, and guess what I notice? Hickeys all up and down her neck, bruised enough that they were sucking on that like she was a fucking fiend smoking on a crack pipe, right? But again, I acted copiously like a gentleman should to know that it's her problem, not mine. So we get in the car, we drive, and we drive into silence. She was dead fast. And just before she got in the car, she knew what she did to tarnish that relationship. She started running down. I had to go chase her to bring her back in the car, but she was ashamed of what she did to compromise psychological needs. Because she knew what she did, but I had to grab her, make sure she got in the car, drive her home. Silence. And the question is, I wanted to ask her, why would you do that? She thought about it, and the funny question is, she said, I want to know if you love me. I said, what? You silly woman. Can you imagine that kind of bloody excuse? And of course, the relationship was non existent, but we carried it on. We tried to salvage it, but it wasn't salvageable, right? At this time, her parents were concerned. So was I. She would come pick me up, and she would have a wine bottle between her legs, not a beer bottle, drinking and driving. I said, woman, what are you doing? Well, first of all, you're sloshed. You shouldn't be driving because you're angry and you could compromise yourself and get in a severe car accident. So I scolded her like any other person. You shouldn't do that. At this time, her parents are asking, her other friends are instigating. So things happen, right? At this time, I was going out with my other friends to other bars, looking at other committed type of relationship that I had with my guy friends. So we would go to strip bars, alcoholic bars, but I was never inclined, even when I was with her, to cheat and maybe meet a girl, in which I did many times, but it never led on to say if I would do that as a relationship status from one person to another to break up, to use that in hindsight or in any other form in envy or jealousy, because it doesn't satisfy anyone's needs. So I get home and I call and I'm concerned. So I say, Alexis, I have to talk to your parents. They said it's a great idea. We should go meet. And at that time, she asked her mother and father to come, and we met in a mall. At this time, I was concerned because I said to her, you know, what I really think, right? So I went there as a person at that age, 2021. Her parents sat beside her, and she was there, right? And this is no joking around, right? So I said, listen, your daughter needs help, right? I myself, I'm not as promiscuous as she is to use that kind of sexual exploitation of men and women and homosexuality and bisexuality and the whatnot. I was still an amateur game. I was never like that in my youth before I became 19, 20. Yes, I've had sex with women, but I was trying to find something more congeal, something more plutonic, right? So at that time, her parents said, I said, listen, at this time, you know, I'm too worried about that if she was pregnant because I knew her promiscuity. It's so sad to say, when guys say, is it my child? You should know that, right? And I still didn't know that, bona fide or not, and it bothered me. So at this time, I I talked to her parents and I said, the best thing is we should break up. And when I soon as said that, but I love Jimmy, preferring to me, I go, listen, you know, it actually, I think she went there to try to either break up with me or ask me for marriage. I didn't know what to answer, right? It was so conforming. So, at that time, I said, I think we should break up. I think you should take care of your daughter because that's her parents, right? And that's a manly or person in that relationship would say, opposed to either side if it was a woman doing that. Totally copacetic, totally honest. But she couldn't have that. She could sleep with any man, but here I came, and she was. My friends were telling me they were going to bars, she was making out with these other guys. It was infuriating. I said, woman, what are you doing to me? Right? This is when she reared her ugly head and did most other heinous things, which led up to the hotel, Radisson Hotel on Winford and DVP. Now, hindsight, I don't know what she's doing or what kind of mannerism or men she's seeing and what kind of procurement is she trying to attach to. So at this time, I had a friend of a friend, and he was much endowed to be with women. So I said, hey, you got a girlfriend, this type of thing. You would go to a hotel party, rent it out for $150 and have fun. Drink a little, do a little toke. And that's about it. We get inside there and we have our sexual nature. They're in their bed, we're in the opposite bed, doing what we do. We're a little bit tipsy. Nothing too normal like what you would have today. Totally heterosexual, total non indifference. There's no swapping or whatsoever or any other type. But it comes to an inclination and you party and then you go to bed, right? You would think you wake up the next day and this is when all hell breaks loose. Now, this is when she constructively tried to commit homicide. No word of lie. Now, here's the criteria. The night before, we all pass out, smoke a little hash, drink a little bit whatsoever. We pass out. You wake up. At this time, like before you're murdered, I would say, like, again, I'm not saying that too lightly because it's very objectionable and very disgusting to know what she had done. But this is what happened. In my angst, I wake up the next day not knowing what had happened, and I woke up and she's at the foot of the bed, and I realized I looked to the right, those two other people are not there, right? And I think, how come I feel wet in my clothes, right? And why are the beds made? My bed and that bed, when we were sleeping, I would not know. But here is the truth. At that time, right, I must have wake up and she was on top of my chest, and she's a big woman, right? More than or average to my weight, which is about 240 pounds. A lot of weight. She's on my chest, and at this time I notice my right arm is under the bed and someone's holding my feet, and I can't tell who it is. So I scream and yell. I go, what are you doing, woman? Because I don't know how I remember this. Hindsight, I guess those brain molecules must have manifest those killings of my dead cells in my brain that weren't all that too brain dead. Because if you explain it in a scientific approach, obviously I wasn't. So I wake up and I now concern what has she done is before and after is very telling to say if someone is killed 15 minutes before, can they remember that if they survived it in hindsight? Well, I can now. So what ended up happening, she grabbed me, she got my chest, suffocated me, and woke up next day, and that's how the bed. I don't know if they put me in water or they doused me, waterboarding, what have you, right? This was most heinous. So I wake up, again, the bed's made there, they're not there, and I don't know if anyone's holding my arm or my feet, but there's 3 people that night, and this is what happened next. I wake up, and she's crying at the foot of the bed, holding a phone, talking to someone. Now, I have a guess who she's talking to in hindsight, but it's most egregious to know going forward, because maybe it's someone I knew and maybe I considered my own friend at one time or another. So I wake up. Eventually, what I'm saying is I was suffocated and I died. And the room looked tidy, nothing. And I even went into the washroom, which is the next step after. So I wake up. She's at the foot of bed crying, "Ah," right? Talking about, and he goes, and she sees me. She goes, "Oh," I'm so surprised. Like, like what happened? At this time, the only thing I remember, I had a burning pain in my head, like a really bad headache, right? So I'm concerned. No, she's crying. No, can you believe I'm concerned about her needs? Little bitch, right? I go, why are you crying, Alexis? Why are you crying? Why are you crying? She won't answer it. She's trying to figure out a motive of what she did because apparently, if I was in that bed, what could have happened next, right? So I don't know what happened prior to me waking up, but I know I was clinically not aware and I had a very bad headache, right? Because again, both beds were made, and I know I went to bed knowing that it didn't make sense. That's the only thing I could look back on. So I ask her, she's not answering her, and I go, "What happened, woman?" Right? She won't answer, so I had an incredible urge to pee, and God Almighty, what waited for me in the washroom was a textbook out of hell. I get in there, and it was a bloodbath. There was blood everywhere, and I had no inclination what the hell was that about. I ran back before I could take a urinate, and I said to her, "Woman, what the hell is that? That looks like a bloody scene." And here she crying. Of course, I had to relieve myself, so I opened the stall, and I see a fetus, still alive, gasping for air. I was shocked. I go, "Woman, what have you done?" She wouldn't answer me, this stupid bitch. Obviously, I had to urinate. I went to the bathtub. I pissed in there. I took her out, and I ran. I thought, oh my god, she might have had a stillbirth or an, a miscarriage. But when I think about it, this is most heinous. No, imagine when she had my feet. The two people had my feet and one in my arm, and that means there's three people. That means that those two other people complicit try to commit homicide. So if you ask any person and they're suffocating you and you had one arm, what would you do, right? You would thrash, you would do anything, try to get off me. But I succumbed, and that's what I think, maybe something or not, but that's not guaranteed to know, even with one hand, right? So, anyways, there's the fetus in the toilet stall, breathing, gasping for air. Oh my God. Right away, I grabbed her. Now, again, I'm concerned again, not knowing anything other than what I could fathom. I get up, I grab her, and I ask her, "Are you still bleeding from your uterus? Is what happened, right?" It's very concerned. Do I have to take you to the hospital? She kept saying, "No, no, I'm not bleeding. I'm not bleeding." Like this is something that she went through trauma after trauma, aborting fetuses. Like I would not know that, right? So I go down to concierge right away. I say, "Come here." He goes, "What's the problem?" I said, "Come here, call 911." He goes, "Why?" I go, "Listen, I don't know what happened up there. Something happened. I don't know. I'm trying to figure out. But maybe she had a miscarriage or something. I gotta know. You call the police right now." And he's arbitrating, like, and I'm thinking, this is serious. And then right away he called 911 and he goes, "Who do I call?" "I don't care. Call the police, ambulance, fire, whoever, right? I gotta worry about her because I'm trying to figure out because it's a bloody mess in there. Go fucking figure it out for yourself." I leave, and at this time I think I see one of her ex-boyfriends or someone else, and I bitch slap him because I'm concerned about her needs. Well, maybe not, or not. And we go home, and that was the end of it, right? And after that, I don't know what actually happened prior to tell, but it never came up the subject again. I think, you know what I mean? So I can't procure. It fucked me up really bad, and I still have horror dreams after that. You understand? And that's bona fide. She knows the truth, and those two accomplices know the truth too, what had happened. Other than that, this woman still continues to berate me in my current living situation, in my lobby, and get these dastardly fuckers to try to commit more homicides under or false pretentious ways. It is very homicidal and very degrading to know there are people like that perpetrating crimes over their own indifference about their homosexuality or their own difference of their own openness of open relationships and other things that are all more different to mine for monogamous relationship status. And that's what you have, okay? So what's funny thing is we later met up and she kind of doctrines this kind of fucking bullshit, right? If I were to say, if I was riding a subway and you talk about your sexual exploitation, and here she's sitting in a subway or in a bus, and she sits opposite me and opens her legs up, and she's not wearing underwear. Now, thankfully, no one was in the back of the bus. Maybe there's two front people in the front. There's a woman, what would you do? Right away, I went beside her and tried to console her. I go, you crazy bitch. Right? But it shows her pretentious ways. And that's how I'm drunk. Now, going forward, that really messed my head up to know how indifferent it was for me to use a condom every other time subconsciously. Even if it was with someone, if I'm going to have some sex with or not, in today's terms, no one wears a condom anymore. When you talk about Planned Parenthood, I would ask about, Kamala Harris and her idea in America, how that has failed the institution itself when they're talking abortion, right? So eventually, I'm still garnering that light, and I have moved on to other relationships, but it always makes me worry of what it could have been and how this woman has magnified this type of perspective. This is Jimmy James signing out.